Nym's Legacy, an Avalair novel, a fantasy novel by Soryn, audio narration by Talkie. In the shadow of the blood moon, when the night sky bleeds crimson and the stars themselves tremble, a being of immense power shall be reborn. He, an omni-mage, will rise, a master of the 7 elements, bound to none and sovereign over all. His coming has been foretold in the whispers of the ancients and etched into the very fabric of destiny. Yet beware, for his path is shrouded in uncertainty. Will he be a force of creation or destruction, a savior or a harbinger of doom? Those who are wise will seek to guide him, for in their counsel lies the hope of balance. But mark my words, should his journey be left untended, or should any seek to bend his will to darkness, they will surely face the full fury of his wrath. For within him stirs a power unlike any the world has seen, a force capable of shaping or shattering the realms. The time draws near, and the choice will soon be upon us all. Guide him with wisdom, or be consumed by the storm he brings. A journal entry in the Book of Nyhm. From the Light Era, exact date unknown. Prologue. It is said that Spiritus birthed the elements. Ignis scorched its creator, angering Aqua who doused its temperament. Terra drank in Aqua's waters, while Aether's winds ripped through the land. Umbra blackened Aether's sky until Lux's brilliance banished it to the shadows. Spiritus absorbed the light and created the elements anew. This is the elemental cycle, the cycle that all things are governed by in Avalair. In a time known to the scholars of old as the Spirit Era, an epoch both at the twilight of one cycle and the dawn of another, a stirring wind arose from the ancient crags of the Ironroot Peaks. This wind, carrying the whispers of forgotten magic, swept southward, gliding over the glassy expanse of the Emerald Lake and weaving through the dense, untamed, verdant wilds. It finally reached the fertile fields surrounding the hallowed Mage Academy of Avalair, where, in a secluded shed hidden from prying eyes, a young woman of extraordinary ambition was meticulously at work. Alora, a young prodigy of her generation, stood in the dim light filtering through the cobbled-together windows of her humble laboratory. The rays of the setting sun caught the edges of the runestones she had so carefully arranged, casting a kaleidoscope of colours that danced across the rough-hewn walls. These runestones, etched with ancient sigils and positioned within an intricate network of magic circles, were the culmination of years of relentless study and precise calculation. They were more than mere tools. They were the key to unlocking a power that had eluded even the greatest of mages for nearly a millennium. Magic in Avalair was not waning. Alora knew this with an unshakable certainty. Yet, for reasons beyond the understanding of most, it had grown increasingly difficult to master, as if the very essence of the arcane arts had become more elusive, more demanding of its wielders. But Alora was not deterred. No, the challenge only fueled her obsession, driving her to the brink of madness and genius. She sought nothing less than the power of an omni-mage. The ability to command all 7 elements at her whim, as effortlessly as one breathes. As Alora reached for the final runestone, her fingers trembling with the thrill of what was to come, the door to her shed burst open with a gust of wind that scattered the carefully filtered light, sending colourful rays bouncing haphazardly across the room. Startled, she spun around, her heart skipping a beat, her eyes narrowing as she prepared to defend her work from whoever dared to intrude at such a crucial moment. But before she could utter a single word, a familiar voice, warm and teasing, filled the space.
Alora, if you're planning to set the world on fire, you could at least wait until I've made some snacks.
Zack stood in the doorway, a roguish grin on his lips, his red hair tousled by the wind, his crimson eyes sparkling with mischief. He leaned casually against the frame, arms crossed over his chest, exuding a confidence that only served to annoy and endear him to Alora in equal measure. Alora relaxed, though only slightly, her irritation quickly melting into something far more complicated as she met his gaze.
Zax,
she sighed, rolling her eyes, but unable to suppress a smile.
Must you always interrupt at the worst possible moment?
Zax shrugged, his grin widening as he pushed off from the doorframe and sauntered into the shed, his presence instantly warming the room.
If you didn't keep disappearing into this glorified shack like some sort of hermit, I wouldn't have to.
He stopped just short of her carefully arranged circles, his eyes taking in the runestones with a mixture of curiosity and concern.
Besides, what kind of best friend would I be if I let you go mad in here all by yourself?
Alora tried to maintain her focus, though Zax's nearness always had a way of throwing her off balance.
I'm not going mad, Zax. I'm on the verge of something incredible, something that could change everything.
Her voice softened, the passion in her words unmistakable.
I could be the first Omni-Mage since Nyhm. Imagine it.
Zax's expression shifted slightly, the playfulness in his eyes tempered by a rare seriousness. He reached out, gently brushing a lock of dark hair away from her face, his fingers lingering just a moment longer than necessary.
I can imagine a lot of things, Alora, but I can't imagine this world without you in it. Are you sure this is worth the risk?
His touch, though brief, sent a shiver down her spine, and for a moment the weight of his words settled over her. But the fire in her heart, the need to prove herself, flared brighter. She stepped closer, her eyes locking onto his, challenging him with a playful smirk.
And what would you do without me, Zax? Set everything on fire just for fun?
He chuckled, his hand falling back to his side, though the intensity of his gaze never wavered.
Maybe. Or I just have to find some other brilliant, beautiful mage to annoy.
Alora's smirk turned into a genuine smile, and she reached up to lightly punch his shoulder.
Good luck with that. No one else would put up with you.
Zax laughed, the sound rich and genuine, echoing through the small space. But as the laughter faded, his expression grew more earnest, a flicker of worry crossing his features.
Seriously though, Alora, if you're going to do this, I want to be here with you. No more sneaking off on your own. We're in this together, remember?
Alora's heart softened at his words, the familiar warmth of their friendship settling over her like a comforting blanket. She knew he was right. Zax always had a way of grounding her, of reminding her of what truly mattered. With a deep breath, she nodded, her resolve strengthening with his support.
Together.
She agreed, her voice firm.
But no more interruptions. This spell requires absolute focus.
Zax held up his hands in mock surrender, his grin returning.
No more interruptions. I'll even be quiet, just this once.
She laughed, the tension easing as she turned back to her work, feeling his reassuring presence beside her. As she reached for the final runestone again, she couldn't help but glance at him out of the corner of her eye.
Just remember, if this works, I'll be able to control fire too, so don't get too cocky.
Zax's grin was positively wicked.
Oh, I'm counting on it. Things are about to get a lot more interesting around here.
With that, Alora placed the last runestone, her heart racing not just from the thrill of the spell, but from the knowledge that Zax was there with her, ready to face whatever came next, together. Unfortunately, she knew that she'd have to send him out of the shed for the final spell. She was fine with putting herself at risk, but not Zax. She wanted him to be close if she needed help, but far enough away so that he'd be safe. Alora stood over the intricate lattice of runestones and magic circles, her mind sharp and her heart steady, now that Zax was by her side. But as the final preparations were made, an unease settled over her. A whisper from the depths of her soul that even her determination could not silence. She turned to Zax, her violet eyes reflecting both resolve and a flicker of concern.
Zax,
she began, her voice soft but firm.
This spell, It's more dangerous than anything I've attempted before. I can't have you here when I cast it. If something goes wrong..."
Zax interrupted her with a shake of his head, his red eyes blazing with defiance.
Allura, I'm not leaving you alone in this. I've faced dangers before, and I'm not about to walk away now.
Allura smiled, touched by his loyalty, but she placed a hand on his chest, her gaze softening as she looked up at him.
"I know, Zax, and that's why I need you close by, but not here. If anything happens, I'll need you to be ready. To pull me out, to save me if it comes to that."
Her voice wavered slightly, the vulnerability she rarely showed slipping through.
"Please, Zax, for me."
He hesitated, his brow furrowing as he searched her eyes. Finally he sighed, conceding to her request.
"Fine,"
he murmured, cupping her face with a tenderness that belied the fire in his blood.
"But I'll be right outside. If anything goes wrong, I'm coming in no matter what."
Allura nodded, a mix of relief and gratitude washing over her. She stood on her toes and pressed a quick, affectionate kiss to his cheek, her lips brushing his skin in a gesture of both reassurance and goodbye. With a reluctant glance back, Zax left the shed, the door closing softly behind him. Allura took a deep breath, refocusing her energy. She was alone now, the weight of her ambition resting solely on her shoulders. The air inside the shed thickened with anticipation, the runestones beginning to hum with the gathering power of the elements. Allura extended her hands over the central circle, her fingers tracing the ancient sigils as she whispered the incantation, her voice growing in strength with each word. The wind outside howled in response, as if the very forces of nature were watching, waiting. The runestones lit up one by one, their glow intensifying until they radiated like miniature suns, each corresponding to one of the 7 elements: sky, water, earth, fire, light, dark, and spirit. Allura's heart pounded in her chest, the sheer power she was invoking almost overwhelming. She could feel the elements within her, stirring, merging, fighting for dominance. Outside, Zax paced restlessly, his senses attuned to the slightest shift in the air. He could feel the magic swelling within the shed, a force so potent it made his skin tingle. His fists clenched at his sides, ready to burst in at the first sign of trouble. Inside, the shed was a storm of magic, swirling colors and energy colliding as Allura channeled everything she had into the spell. Her eyes blazed with determination, but beneath it, there was a sliver of fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of the power she was about to unleash. And then, in a single terrifying instant, everything went wrong. The runestones, once glowing with harmonious energy, began to pulse erratically. The circles flickered, the magic spiraling out of control as Allura desperately tried to regain her grip on the spell. The power was too much, too raw, too wild to be contained.
"No!"
Allura cried out, her voice lost in the cacophony of magic. The shed quaked, the walls straining under the pressure, and then, with a deafening roar, the world exploded in a blinding flash of purple light. Zax was thrown back by the force of the blast, his body slamming into the ground as a shockwave of magic radiated outwards, shattering the shed and sending debris flying in all directions. The sky above turned a dark, ominous hue, the air thick with the scent of burning wood and raw energy.
"Allura,"
Zax shouted, his heart lurching in his chest as he scrambled to his feet, his eyes frantically searching the smouldering ruins of the shed. Others from the Mage Academy, drawn by the explosion, began to rush towards the scene, their faces pale with fear and concern. Ignoring the chaos around him, Zax plunged into the wreckage, his hands tearing through the debris with a frantic urgency. The air was thick with dust and the remnants of shattered magic, but he pushed on, driven by a single, desperate need: to find her. And then he saw her. Alora lay crumpled among the rubble, her body glowing faintly with residual magic, the light casting an ethereal sheen over her pale skin. But Zax's blood ran cold when he saw her left arm. It was gone, the limbs severed cleanly by the violent forces she had unleashed. Blood pooled around her, staining the ground a deep crimson.
Alora.
Zax cried out, his voice cracking with a mix of terror and grief as he knelt beside her, his hands trembling as he gently lifted her into his arms. She was unconscious, her breathing shallow, her beautiful violet eyes closed in a sleep that seemed far too deep. The other mages arrived, their shocked gasps filling the air as they took in the devastation. But Zax barely registered them, his focus solely on the woman he held. Her body still pulsed with faint magical energy, a sign that she was still alive, barely.
We need to get her to the academy. Now.
Zax barked, his voice fierce and commanding as he stood, cradling Alora's limp form against his chest. Without waiting for a response, he began to run, the others quickly falling into step behind him, their faces grim. As they raced towards the Mage Academy, the wind that had once carried whispers of forgotten magic now howled with sorrow, the world itself mourning the tragedy that had befallen its brightest star. And yet, deep within that sorrow, there was a spark of hope, of determination. Alora was not gone, not yet. And as long as there was breath in Zax's body, he would fight to bring her back.